They're building new buildings already in the works, Chuck.
Recording in progress.
This is this too.
I've got it sitting here.
You get it, okay.
I already had it pulled up. And welcome everybody to the select board meeting for December 17th, 2024. If everyone please rise. And Greg, you be so kind to lead us in.
Here we go. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I saw Sylvia, by the way, at Shaw's. It's fine.
Somebody else saw her. Too.
Bonnie saw her at the recycling. Yeah, she started to help her unload her truck. Her
That was the story I heard, yeah.
had several white bags in there. And after a couple, she said, I can do it. Yeah,
So she's feisty as ever.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the point in the meeting when we listen to public comments. These are comments on any topic that is not on the agenda. If anybody has something they want to talk about that's not on the agenda, now would be the time.
Makes sense.
I am not seeing any hands up, so we're going to move to the approval of the minutes from the select board meetings of December 3rd and December 6th. The December 3rd meeting was a regular meeting and December 6th was our budget meeting at the Park House.
Yeah, so you've already approved the
Some came back and I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No.
Okay, then let's continue as is.
Yes, you as is.
Okay, thank you, Jan, for researching that. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the minutes of December 3rd and 6th. Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and the minutes are approved. Item number 5 is we talked about it at our last regular meeting of possibly extend the moratorium that we put in place on the payment in lieu of parking in the town core. And the planning commission is working on amending the language, but it doesn't look like it's going to get done in the amount of time that we'd laid out. So the recommendation is that we consider extending the present 90-day moratorium for another 90-day period.
That's right. So I think Heidi last time had made the motion originally to establish the moratorium for any parking applications in the town for 90 days as it pertains to section 9.66 in the town's land use ordinance, pending an updated amendment from the PC.
So, Scott, what was shared with us was a change that was only the wording went from within the town core to
Within the
downtown zoning district. Was that their suggestion or is that,
that was our
we went back
our zoning
from?
recommendation to,
Oh, okay.
to us in the.
All right. I didn't know whether that was, I know that that's what we were recommending, but is it as simple as that or?
Well, it can be for now. The idea is that we'll look at it more fully after we get.
One of the suggestions that we heard was that if an applicant is considering using this mechanism due to a parking deficit, that it come here first.
Mhm.
That was Mike's, yeah.
To at least establish whether or not we'll consider it. I think that would be very helpful.
And
Then to have the applicant go through the whole process and then come here. Our hands were kind of tied by previous decisions that were made. I'm not completely, I mean, we could have really thrown a bucket of cold water on the whole thing, but we didn't really have a good, solid basis for doing that, so.
The PC did vote last night to have the public hearing.
Okay.
So that at least is in motion.
Good, thank you. So I would entertain a motion to extend the moratorium for an additional 90 day.
Move to extend the moratorium on payment in lieu of parking in the town core for an additional 90-day period. The first 90 days started on October 1st.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It looks like 5-0. It is 5-0 and motion's carried. We've been considering how the town-owned land at and around the airport, the old airport property. That's accessed by Airport Road. And we thought it might be a good idea to consider issuing an RFP for the possible sale and development of that property. There's been a lot of discussion outside of the board's inclusion in that discussion, but there's proposals out there that we're aware of. And it would be interesting to see what might come in. Anybody want to add anything to that?
I do. I've heard from a couple of people on this issue and I'd love to know if you have kind of some memory of, I've heard that when this became a town-owned property, that the idea was that it was supposed to remain town-owned in perpetuity. And I don't know if that rings a bell, and I would just like to kind of know a little bit more of just around the genesis of the whole situation.
That does not ring a bell. And as a matter of fact, the property was adjusted so that Dick Hayes could shift the actual landing strip itself onto a piece of property. And I think the boundaries of that property were adjusted after we acquired it. As you may remember, we acquired that property from
Guinness, right?
the Gillespie Group in part of a settlement of a UDAG loan repayment dispute. And there was something in the neighborhood of $3.4 million owed to the town. I believe we got, my recollection is 1.1 million in cash. The airport property, there was some other consideration, and then there was an actual percentage of net profit of the hotel going forward, which, by the way, has never shown a profit. So
Waiting.
that and a couple of bucks will buy you a cup of coffee. So, but I don't remember that
Okay.
as being part of it. Not saying that it's not. Yeah, we'd have to go all the way back to 1980
Are there any
something.
documents that we could pull up that we could at least just,
We could check the town clerk records.
yeah, let's
And-
clear that just
Yeah.
before. That would be
Right.
good to know and to quell any rumors.
Yeah. Yeah, that took a lot of turns. And the only thing that put that forced that to happen was when Guinness came along and wanted to invest in the resort. And they didn't want the resort to be at odds with the town. And so they said, you got to get this cleared up. So they were the ones that forced that to happen. We may be one of the few towns that actually got something out of the UDAG loan.
What year was that?
It had to be 80. We were talking about it in 84, but I don't think I had it in 84, 85, 86, I would say. Joe O'Day was our attorney. Shoot, names elude me, but the accountant from our was our in-house expert. Oh, for crying out loud. The guy I know well, and I just can't.
Where are they
think of
from?
it. What's that?
Where were they from?
From Arlington. Lives on Route 313, a little ways out on the left.
That's okay.
Okay.
May of 1998.
May of 1998, thank you.
There was an agreement 7 years before that, but the actual conveyance was May of 98.
Great. Well, so just understanding that we should have that, like, kind of look into that information a little bit. Do we feel still comfortable issuing an RFP while we're
Well, I think we could
researching?
make the decision to issue an RFP contingent upon research
Yeah.
showing that we have that authority.
Yeah,
And that way it would give the authorization for it to go forward.
okay. So I'd like to make a motion to issue an RFP for the exploration of potential sale and development of the town-owned land in and around Airport Road.
Contingent upon.
Contingent upon our researching and making sure that we have the authority to do so.
I'll second.
And seconded by Jan?
He did.
Oh, okay. He did.
I did.
So Jonathan, seconded by Jonathan, all in favor, say aye.
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 Aye, that's 5-0.
There's a hand up in the audience. I don't know if that was in relation to.
Norma, was that in relation to what we were just talking about?
No,
Okay,
couldn't hear it, but I just wondered if I could leave a request.
you know, what, I will allow it. You came in just after I closed the discussion of public comments, but you're here. We're here, absolutely, just step to the podium. I'm not gonna make you go away empty-handed.
Thank you. I would like the town to consider the prohibition of engine braking within the town limits. This will eliminate the complaints received from several sectors of town, because I've been watching it on TV. I think that would make it fair for everybody. It's really been a problem for me. Because I have one little rental and they're considering not coming because they're here to relax. And it shakes everything in my house.
Yeah, that's consistent with requests that we've heard from others and
I heard that, so
our
but I just put my 2 cents.
big item we're working on right now is the budget among
Yeah.
things and,
That.
but it's in the queue, I think, to discuss that.
Get it on
Thank you, Norma.
upcoming slide.
And having mentioned that the budget is our big item, that's next on the agenda. When we had our informational meeting at over at the Park House, I guess all we did was take information. We didn't have any discussion at that point in time. And of course, Scott, welcome back. Scott has been away but I think it would be, and I know you've done some work, so maybe I'll let you present on that, but I was gonna say it might be helpful to kind of get a sense from the board where they would like to see this land, if it's acceptable the way it is, because we really haven't discussed it. But I'm a little, I will say, having heard all of the criticisms of Montpelier and their handling of the school funding, even though a lot of it was outside of their control, as we've been told, it would be kind of disingenuous of us to approve another big increase at this level and still criticize that. It's all yours, Scott.
Well, I don't have an easy answer for you. So I went back after the meetings that we had on Friday and shaved a bunch of things off as best I could, and yet we had more additions than subtractions following that meeting. And yet also, there's potential for appropriations increase added in there too, from two two groups. So I'm given all that, Mike had suggested we possibly use some money from the tax-free investment.
Taxpayer relief fund.
Thank you. And so I put that into this current version right now. Yes.
Sorry, when you say that the numbers. Oh, I see, I think I see what you're saying. So the voted appropriations, when you're looking at it, like line 658, the 656, 657, 658, et cetera.
Mhm.
Those numbers in the 26 budget don't include obviously the 20,000. They're still marked at the current appropriation. So is that negative 1.63 actually a false number? Because,
All that is a number reflecting the total appropriations only. So compared to last year,
Without the increases.
without the increases, correct?
okay,
So you see, the VNA and hospice requesting 20,000, and then the community library requesting 335,000.
right.
Those numbers have not been inserted, and if approved by the voters, would add to the total needed to be raised.
And the decrease, even though it shows up as a decrease in this section, actually got added back in. That was GNAT. It was taken out of voted appropriations and moved into the
Right.
budget.
That in the North Side Day School,
They went down 5.
They went, yes.
Yeah.
They went down on 5, but
Um,
that 2,000 for GNAT is still in the budget.
it is, correct.
So if we were to, in fact, to decouple, let's just say for the purposes of understanding our portion of the budget, the municipal portion, not including voter appropriations, and look at how offsetting the tax relief, property tax relief fund, using those funds, because I know we discussed, like, how can we look at just what our portion is and how that increased? Now, I understand what you just said, Ivan, is like, given what's happening at the state level, we have to be as cognizant as possible of that. So separating it is almost disingenuous in the fact that it doesn't bear the full burden of what our taxpayers will have.
Yeah, but the reason we take it out, and we can argue it either way, is because we have no control over that part of it.
Right.
That's up to the voters at town meeting to approve that. The part that over which we do have control is the rest of the budget. Voted appropriations removed. I mean, and we have you can get the numbers here.
Right.
And work them. The one piece that we do not have is anticipated growth in the grand list. I mean, that has an effect. We're looking at actual dollars to be raised by property tax, but with growth in the grand list, of course, the tax rate itself will not go up commensurate to the number of dollars. So we could absorb, if there's a huge increase expected in the grand list, it could offset some of this increase in the budget, which a lot of it is insurance and increases in tangible things that it just costs more.
Yeah.
And pretty hard to reduce our use of that stuff. Victoria, I see you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is around, and I shouldn't have my collaborative background, so I'm sorry I'm not here for work reasons. So let me take my background off and ask if I can ask my question in a moment.
I think it matters.
I don't think it matters that much, Victoria. It's semantics. You've stated that you're not representing the collaborative in these
Correct.
comments, and we accept that.
Okay. So my question is, as a resident, has the town ever considered, or does the town have the ability to limit the amount of appropriations that a nonprofit is asking for. Especially with the ones that are, I think it's $5,000 or more that have to be voted on by voters.
By
On a
Australian
ballot?
ballot. Yeah, that's correct. It's, I believe it's 5,000. I mean, we have a process that we go through where the first time somebody, and you're well aware of this, the first time somebody makes a request, they have to petition for it. If they're successful and it gets on the voted appropriations, if that appropriation stays the same, we don't require them to do another permit. Another petition. We allow them just to request to have it put back on at the same amount. And of course, if they ask for an increase, they have to go through the petition process again. We don't have to accept the petition, but it gets very messy if we don't. I mean, what could ultimately happen is if we don't accept the petitioned amount, it could be petitioned again and could force us to another town meeting, which is very expensive on one hand, and it's pretty easy to pack a special town meeting with supporters.
Oh, I've
So-
seen it packed
so-
with supporters.
Well, I know, but I still think it probably serves us best if they're successful in circulating a petition. It seems like everybody always is. It's probably best that we just put it in at the amount that's on the petition and let the voters where we.
Right, but I think
where we
my
supposedly have the most voters.
I think my question goes, I'm going to rephrase it a different way.
Okay.
Could the town create I don't want to call it not an ordinance, but a policy, much like we did around any appropriation in excess of $5,000 has to be voted for on a ballot, paper ballot. Could the town create some kind of guidance that says, okay, we support appropriation requests. However, no nonprofit can ask for more than X number of dollars. Before they get into signatures and any of that, it's like, I remember like, I don't know, 5 or 8 years
Yeah,
ago.
before you get too far into it, Victoria, this whole process is very closely prescribed by state statute. We don't have a lot of authority to manipulate how we do things.
That I didn't know, so maybe you just answered my question.
Okay, yeah, I mean, just anything that we do, a town does not have the authority to go out and create things on its own. Anything that we do has to be supported before we even start in state statute. We are creatures of the state. The state has complete control over what towns do. They give us authority to work within that structure, but we can't step outside of that structure. Elections are very closely regulated.
So, I've seen this question come up several times before in other towns, and one town tried to create a pie saying, we're only gonna allot this amount of money for appropriations, and we'll divvy it up among the various groups applying for it. And that's one way to handle it. But again, like you said, let's say one of the groups is dissatisfied with their slice of the pie, then they go out and get signatures. And then instead of 5,000, they're requesting 25,000, and the voters generally, supported those.
So the two large, so VNA is requesting a $10,000 increase from 10 to 20. And Manchester Community Libraries is a 17,000. I think he used the 3%. So both of those would both be voted appropriations on the ballot.
Yeah. They'd be voted in the voting booth by Australian ballot because of the magnitude of the
It's
overall.
5.66%
Oh,
increase.
Yeah, I mean,
doesn't make sense.
voted appropriations are tough. I may be the only person that consistently at town meeting votes no on all of them. And I have a reason for doing that. This town is extremely philanthropic. These organizations are critical to the community. The municipal portion in most cases is not a significant part of their revenue stream, and I think it could be made up in other ways. And what we're doing is we're forcing people that aren't able to contribute to go ahead and contribute through their property taxes. And I have a problem with that. I do realize that there are some not-for-profits that are operating under a provision that states that they have to have a municipal component to what they're doing. And I'm not sure which ones they are, but there are not-for-profits that have that as part of their makeup. But I don't think it's a reasonable or even efficient way to make up revenue for most of these organizations. Anyways, we have that process, and that's what we do.
And you mentioned the possible increase in the grand list as offsetting the actual tax bill. Gordon's here if you wanted to comment on it.
You see big increases for this fiscal year, 2026? Do you think there's is the brewery gonna be online at that point? No.
No. I think it's gonna be consistent with last year. But not, you gotta remember, even 1% is 16, 17 million dollars, so. It's hard to get 2 or 3%.
Right.
That's a lot of construction.
Yeah.
So we do have some new homes, but not any big projects that want at least partially.
So we used to factor in a growth of 1% in trying to project what the tax rate might be. And it seems like that might be
Probably.
a reasonable.
It was 1.8, right, and on average and statewide, it was 1.8 during the pandemic, but now we're maybe coming back to the 1% pre-pandemic era. Because we're at 13.2 on average permits per year for residences, right?
That sounds.
Yeah. So I mean, that kind of puts in perspective.
So I guess if we can kind of just go back to your suggestion, Scott, to kind of raid the old piggy bank again. We talked about this a lot, and I think our reliance on the taxpayer relief fund has been excessive over the last several years. And I also think that the mechanism under which we've been accessing this fund might not have been how we should have been doing it. And I guess I really feel like we're in a situation where we should be bolstering our reserve funds at the moment because we've drawn them down considerably. And, I think that if the people in town want things like, new tennis courts and subsidized programming for kids and libraries, then we have to pay for it. And we have to think about that when we're going through this budget. And, I really feel strongly that our obligation is to be supportive of the buildings here and the people that work in them and providing those services, and that those incremental things need to really be looked at like what they are is incremental. And that's got to be, we can't keep going back to our taxpayer relief fund.
I say it every year, and there are core services that we offer that nobody else can provide. And then it's such basic things as maintaining the roads and the sidewalks and the infrastructure, providing the governmental services the town is expected to provide. Those kind of things are core services. And then there's things, like you say, call them incremental, or they're fringe items that are.
They're great. I love them.
Yeah.
We
Oh,
need
yeah,
them.
that's great.
but
I know we have a couple of hands up. I'll go to the Manchester Business Association. I believe that's what that one is.
John Burnham, yeah.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Hey, everybody. How's everyone tonight? Just wanted to kind of comment a little bit about what you're discussing, as well as the, as we know, as you said, the core services that the town provides, those are expenses that are just going to be there, and they're not going down. They're going to continue to grow. And that's in some cases because you want to take care of the people that work for the town, and which makes total sense. So I look at this and what you discuss is more of a revenue problem than an expense problem. Again, you may have some side items that could be tweaked here and there when you're looking at your budget, but we as an organization, as you know, are trying to continue to draw revenue to the town of Manchester through the various things we do. And hopefully the efforts that we make, which I believe shown, and we discussed when we saw you folks back on December 7th, that, helped increase the local option tax revenue by $200,000 or $300,000 since pre-COVID levels. And that's what we want to continue to do. And I know we kind of talked about the town hiring an events manager, but then, we kind of went back to the table after our meeting with you folks and listened, and obviously appreciated your feedback, and said, well, what if instead of the town hiring it, they became an MBA person? And like you folks have done over the years with the 50,000 that you have done with us with the match, we do the same thing with that position. And that if the town gives $25,000 to the MBA, we will hire, and that's all it will be used for, is this events person who, from our perspective, can, if we increase the events in the area, it means, of course, higher regional and national visitors. That's increased revenue through rental and other fees held, full utilization of town assets from Dana Thompson Park, Applejack Stadium. I was looking at the Parks and Recs budget. When you look at the revenue they produce versus the expense, you're talking about a couple $100,000 loss technically. I know it's definitely a wonderful thing to have in our town, but we could potentially help maximize the revenue to that facility, make that loss either much smaller. And not only that, but at the same time, by these revenues are going to increase your rooms and meals, and that would bring in more local option tax revenue, which would then, of course, help sustain not only the budget that the town has to present, those core expenses, but as well can actually help fill the property tax relief fund, start putting money back into it versus taking away from it. And that's how we kind of look at that position, really, between the work that this role currently does and also this new position. We feel that would do, and of course we would again do a match. We make sure that we minimally match the 25,000 the town gave for this events person who's going to be focused on driving and supporting current events and also bringing new things to the town, especially in the off seasons, to drive revenues to town assets as well as to the local option tax revenue.
John,
and I know that. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I looked at the calculations based on this year's 2025 budget, and if we added that position in there, not what you currently have budgeted for 2026, it's less than a 0.5% increase.
Okay, I appreciate you putting the context of the events coordinator in the way that you did, as a way it could offset and generate significant revenue directly to the town. I understand that an events coordinator would certainly help the business community because it would bring people to town and people do things when they're in town. And that doesn't always translate to direct revenue to the town of Manchester, although a healthy business community is certainly a positive thing. I guess what I would like to do is just do a few dinner napkin scratchings and try to figure out what a contribution might be through increased revenue at the park, and rooms and meals, and sales tax and that sort of thing, and see what the net might be to the town. Because I'm gonna be really hard pressed to vote in favor of any new initiatives that don't have a revenue stream attached to them, simply because of the position that we find ourselves in. It's unfortunate that in order to maintain the same level of service that we did last year, or that we're providing this year, there is going to be a 10 or 11% increase in the property tax contribution.
On just.
That's just the reality of it. Yeah.
On just the municipal.
Yeah, that's the
not
reality
the-
of it.
right.
Everything has gone up. We're seeing that now, and the anticipation is that it's not going to be any better in 2026.
Yeah, and we're not unique in the state. I mean, Montpelier's looking at a 24 to 26% increase, and they've kind of washed their hands and said, all right, voters, you pick. You
I don't take a lot of comfort from that, and if I'm on a plane and the pilot comes on and says, we've just lost an engine, and he comes back on and says, we just lost another engine. But the bright side is the plane next to us lost all their engines. It's an old joke, but it's doesn't give me a lot of comfort.
Well, I think, looking at the amount that's been added from the transfer in, it's about 100,000, I think. One of the other places that's a hole, or at least for the last couple of years has been a hole, is obviously the rental income from the depot properties, where, we were close to $100,000 in 2023, and now we're expecting.
We were 125 at 2023 was actually a partial year.
Right.
I believe it was 125 a year, and then it started to phase out.
So that's,
That was unfortunate, but we also had a verbal agreement
right.
that fell through very last minute. So we just,
And it would be helpful to get that property back on the tax rolls.
Well, to answer your question, if that were to come back on the tax rolls, that's a $1.X million property, whatever, right?
Nothing
It's,
that doesn't translate to the bottom line, but.
No, but
That property alone isn't going to give us our 1% that we need to.
sure, but.
I mean, it could, but. I
But,
don't know
to
what
talk
it would.
about replenishing funds, getting back to having a reserve, that is certainly something that, where if we were to say, okay, $100,000 goes towards bringing down the tax rate with an expectation of X coming back in to replenish those funds beyond that.
Yeah, but I guess my argument is that if it's a taxpayer relief fund, every year is a special situation. Like every year can't be like, we need relief. You can't every year say, like, we have to put in pickleball courts. We have to do this. Like, there's got to be a point where you say, we have to build up a reserve fund. This is not the piggy bank. That's not what it was set up for. This is, you just can't. And if that's any of these things being taken out of the budget are unacceptable, well, then you have to pay more taxes. It just.
We have enough years of experience with the option taxes and the property tax relief fund, so that we can kind of project what's a reasonable number to draw from that year to year to year to year to offset property taxes and affect the why we initially created this tax was to reduce property taxes. There needs to be enough in there. We built it up to a pretty significant fund in the beginning because it was supposed to sunset, and we tried to create a soft landing in the out years. And then the legislature eliminated the sunset, but very shortly after that, they eliminated the tax on clothing. The state went to the streamlined sales tax initiative, which included all the states around us. I think there were 19 states at that point, and they all had to be uniform. And in order for it to be uniform, clothing went away, and we lost $500,000 or $600,000 in option taxes when that happened. And then we made it back up again with the rooms and meals, and we're back up to about that same level of contribution. But we're not looking at a sunset anymore. That specter has been removed. Like I said, we have these years of experience, and it looks like we've been overspending a little bit. And so agreeing with Heidi, it probably should be we might want to look at a 1.2 million contribution or something like that with the anticipation that they're going to continue to perform. And that would give us that cushion that we need if things failed terribly in any one given year and we actually needed that fund to create a soft landing to get us to another year.
Something extraordinary outside of our control.
Outside of our control. I mean,
And
and
that's-
the state taking the tax off clothing. I mean, that was outside of our control, the streamlined sales tax. You know, all of that was outside of our control. So those things can happen. And we've managed it really well, but the number got small, that the actual account balance. Victoria, do you still have your hand up?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have two questions. One goes to my first question. When you were answering my question, Mr. Chair, you mentioned that quite possibly some nonprofits have in their guiding documents a mandate that says they have to seek town appropriations. If there are any nonprofits that receive appropriations from Manchester taxpayers, could the select board please provide a list of those nonprofits that are mandated to have town appropriations?
I'm not sure that we have that information in-house. I can remember it might have been the old Brock organization, the Opportunity Council. I think it was mandated that they had to have a municipal portion in order to access the federal money that they, which was a considerably bigger bucket. Beyond that, I don't really know, and I don't know if we have that information.
We don't require that.
Yeah, we don't require them to give us that information, so
And
it
then,
might be a little tough to figure it out.
okay, and then my second question is what you were more recently speaking about, which is the 1% tax. Could you, if you have this information, and maybe Scott has this information, could you provide the voters and any information as around how much the town pays the state to, what's the word I'm looking for? To,
Administer?
that's the word. Thank you. Administer.
Um,
I'm so
I can-
appreciative
I
of
can-
everyone that helps me find the words in my vocabulary.
I can tell you that we collect 1%, or
Yeah,
and it goes directly to the state.
correct.
They send us 70% of that, so we get 0.7 of 1%, but they also subtract out a dollar amount per, what do you call it?
Transaction.
Per return, and I don't know
Okay.
what that's up to now. It's, it used to be, it changes as more towns take advantage of the process, but, the state's making a lot of money off our 1%.
So is
That-
there
that
a
would be-
way, is there a way that the town has the skill set and the knowledge and the ability to do that in-house and save that money?
No, we've fought for years. The town of Manchester voted to put in place a 1% option sales tax. And it was because we have a big infrastructure, and a big part of that infrastructure is to accommodate people that were coming to town to spend money. And yet the whole burden of maintaining that infrastructure was on the backs of the property taxpayers. And I took that argument to Montpelier, and they turned us down, and we went about 10 years. We had a vote, 75% of the people in Manchester saw the benefit to this and voted in favor of it. It was 75 to
I
25.
think that was one of the first times I was able to vote in
And I
Manchester.
thank you for your participation in that. But the state said, no, we're not going to let you do that. we could have created a charter. The town of Manchester does not have a charter. It actually could have been a single issue charter, but it would have to be approved by the legislature because we can't unilaterally create a charter. And they said, no, we won't approve that charter. So don't even waste your time. It was about 10 years before some of the Chittenden County larger population-based cities started to get interested in 1% option tax. And we were able to jump on that. We were one of the first 3, I think, towns or cities in Vermont to put it in place. But it's completely controlled by the state. Our authority to do it is controlled by the state. The way it's collected is controlled by the state, and the part that we get remanded back to us is controlled by the state. As I said before, we are creatures of the state.
I understand that part because Ivan, thank you so much for answering my questions tonight. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you for those good questions. John, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I do. Just to quickly say that as you know, the state retains about the option tax revenue that we collect or that we get about $750,000 these days, and with their fees, another 90,000. So we're talking about 800,000. They keep of all the money that we raise in an annual basis, which is interesting. But there's, as you said, nothing we can do with that. I just wanted to ask, because you had commented, Ivan, thank you. Is there anything the MBA can do to help provide information to support what as a select board in the town would like to see in regards to potential revenues and stuff? Because my concern is that, you know, as you know, this is the budget for fiscal year 2026, which we wouldn't even see these funds until the summer of 2025 at the earliest, which means we wouldn't even be looking to hire the position until then, because we can't afford to do it on our own, unfortunately, at this point. And by the way, just so everyone knows in the room, you know, we're not looking to have the town fund this position for 10 years. We believe that after a few years, once it's up and running and off the ground, then not only the town will continue to reap the benefits of that position, but that 25,000 will no longer be necessary, because that position will be able to generate enough revenue to pay for itself.
We heard that from another entity.
Well,
I'm not disagreeing with you, John.
I think anything that we can do to continue to have a good relationship with our business community and the business association is beneficial to both the municipality and the people that live and work here. So anything that we can do to make that stronger would be welcomed. I don't have off the top of my head anything that I would need from you at this point in time, but thank you for your offering.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Getting back to the budget. There have been years where it's come in at, say, 6%, which is where we thought we were coming in not so long ago. And we'd say, well, that's unacceptable. Let's establish a number and try to get there. I'm looking, I can't even establish a number. I mean, I've looked at it and I'm going, you know, this is such a big increase. And I start looking at all the incremental things that make up that increase. And a lot of those we have virtually no control over. I can't say, well, let's shoot for 5%. Let's cut it in half. It would be nice, but I'm not really sure how we would do that.
I mean, the biggest potential apple that we could use to slash this to get it down to an acceptable level would be to take the DPW dump truck out, buy it off for another year. That's $270,000. But that we also had a loan built in for the revenue side. So I mean,
Yeah, I don't.
then we start to push off the equipment that needs to be replaced. And it's never.
That's a slippery slope. And if it's something that we know that we need and it's on a replacement schedule that meshes with all of our other capital needs, if you move one item, it can really throw things out of whack for the next year because we have expectations for that year also.
Is the board totally?
And on that 270, we were looking at financing on that. Is that correct?
Yes, we had built 200 towards that.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a bigger chunk as sounds.
And like you mentioned, I think you said the fire department, when they came in, there were a couple items that were, for instance, the air.
The air tanks, compressor, yeah, so
It's like every time.
that's line 295.
$100,000 of stuff that wasn't on the,
There's a lot of moving pieces. We've got the Depot Street properties. That most likely will generate a chunk of capital for the town. And get, maybe, depending on who presents the proposal, create property taxes. I've seen creative ideas that wouldn't do that. There may be a possibility to grow our capital, our CERC fund by a significant amount of money, which would allow us to use that for capital purchases in the out years, but I don't know if we can bank on any of that for.
I mean, it's difficult. We're looking at the FY 26 budget.
Right.
That's next July.
What we could do is, and I've been trying to steer us back toward using the CERC fund as more of a revolving fund where we draw down from it, but replenish it. We could draw that fund down, knowing that there's going to be
Capital
infusion down the road. We could draw it down farther than what we normally would, knowing
haven't
that
we
we're going to
already
be able.
done that though? We-
Well, I know, but what's the balance now?
Under $1 million.
I've got it.
Do you know that offhand?
I got the sheet here.
It's a shorter piece of paper.
The single, yeah, there's.
It is.
It's
It's better.
this one.
Reserve, yeah. Total value, 828,000.
That was 800, yeah.
On this other sheet, it's 794,000, but different dates.
Right.
This is actually just something that I just thought of though on a different note, in the previous meeting, we approved using some of the ARPA funds that had to be, where did that, does that fall into this year's budget? And that appropriate, that money.
It doesn't get assigned anywhere. It's like extra money in your checkbook. So it's in the general fund. It's going to sit there until,
It's been earmarked for a specific purpose,
right.
but we don't know what the timing of that is. And that purpose isn't accounted for in this budget. It's one of those things that when it comes up, we'll have the revenue to offset it. And it would be an extra budgetary transition, but it would be a wash because the revenue would offset the expenditure. And those kind of things happen when grants come in, unanticipated grants.
Especially that grant. It may not require our $200,000
Right.
contribution.
I think ARPA
You
is
can't
pretty well
count.
spoken for.
Right.
What did we allocate that 56,000 for last time? What did we?
August payroll.
It's not, yeah.
That's,
Right, but we didn't officially
No.
use that towards it.
Right, but we were talking about
We were
it,
talking about pickleball slash.
using it for the right. So the 200 was for the
The
flood
Bournebrook, yeah, flood.
and the 56, was it?
51, I thought it was.
Was for, no, that's where we're parking it.
Yeah.
Right.
Right, but
But we haven't officially,
Using it.
we're gonna use it for this
tennis
future.
courts and pickleball.
Right. I mean, you could take that 51 and put it in as revenue for this year's budget.
I think we have to. If we can look at this year and say, there are some really unusual things going on here that won't be happening in future years, I would be in favor of that. But if this is just a normal incremental increase that we're gonna experience like we did last year,
Yeah.
and again this year, it's not gonna do us any good to slide it off.
Kicking it down the road.
No,
And I don't, and Montpelier, right, they've run into that. And they slid it off for a number of things, and now it's hitting them all at once.
right.
And I think, you know, the standard that we're trying to hold the different departments to, like, police, fire, rescue, in terms of outlining capital expenditures, like huge things like the trucks and the, you know, possibly building maintenance and all of that kind of thing. And giving us an idea so that there aren't big surprises. And I do think, you know, some of the stuff that the fire department brought up was, you know, some of it's related to the new recruits, some of it's related to equipment failures and like, but that 100 grand was a surprise. Yeah,
Right,
I
with
mean,
it.
that was an incremental surprise. Which is tough in a budget like this, that's just, you know, but you know, I think if the more that we can look at a timeline and say that this is where we see these large, you know, vehicles, but then you can't not spend the money than the years that you said you're going to spend the money on them. So, because then it's just making it, you know, it's making it next year is going to be more painful. And you're always just hoping for
Well, I
something
think-
to change.
I think John hit it right on the head when he said I mean, your expenditures are what they are. You've got a revenue problem. And, yeah, if it was a one-time deal, which was kind of what he was saying, is if we can get more revenue to come in on your option taxes, that might help in the out years. But,
But we had
not if
we
we're
had
already getting.
incredible revenues on the options tax for the first 2.5, 3 years of the
Yeah.
pandemic. So if we can't have made hay when the sun was shining then, I don't know when we could have. And we kept drawing down that reserve fund. So I just think, you know, we either,
Well, there was a point where we mistakenly did not put that 1% in where it was supposed to be.
What happened was any funds that we use out of that account have to be authorized by the voters, and they're authorizing a specific number
anticipate.
to the budget.
Yeah.
And if our revenues exceed that number, we put it into the account, and if they don't reach that number, then the voters have authorized to draw that down. But there were 2 years when we took money out of there to balance the budget, and I didn't notice it until after it happened. And we have to make sure that doesn't happen again, because there was a significant expenditure out of there.
So, and again, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to play off of what you said, Ivan, here. Yes, we're trying to work on cycles, especially for like the fire department. We hear the talks about, you know, the truck that's coming in. By the way, I think it's really important that we talk about the regionalization of the usage of a ladder truck that's going to require $1.4 million for that, you know, that's now. Who knows what it's going to be in a couple of years. But if we were to say, okay, the dump truck is on cycle right now,
Mhm.
right? What if we were to look ahead 1 year? What would be next on the cycle? And if just like, let's just say that we can't bank on the money coming in right now from the sale of the potential sale of the depot property or any other income that might be coming in. But we could, I don't want to say kick the can down the road, but swap them out by a year for something that might be a smaller expense on the budget.
I think what we should really be thinking about as a group is having equipment reserve funds like the one we
Yes.
have for the police department, so that
This.
it's normalized. It's over a period of time. If you say over the next 10 years, the average cost to replace this equipment is going to be $200,000 a year. You don't make it 50 1 year and 300 the next year. You have a steady amount that you're putting in to these funds that are drawn down on a schedule when the equipment needs replacing.
Yeah, what
And
you
it-
need to look at in the capital budget is those items that we pay for from the general fund.
Mhm.
Because the capital amounts fluctuate
So
wildly.
crazy.
It went from $6 million one year to $1 million something the next, but that's because it was offset by grants. And when those grants are available, those projects take place, and yeah, it has a huge price tag, but we know that that money's gonna offset it. But it's these things, the trucks, the equipment, the things that we know has a lifespan. The trucks are generally the smaller trucks are on a 10-year, the bigger trucks go longer. I'm not sure.
Yeah, they can go up to 20.
Yeah.
really,
Well, and the
but-
police cars are much shorter, so that they have
Absolutely, yeah.
it's every,
Yeah.
but they all
But we
have-
know what that
we all-
cycle is.
Yeah, and the police and the fire department have done a really good, and the ambulance.
But getting back to your point, it's gonna be really tough to transition, because we're still gonna have to make those capital purchases, but then put something into a sinking fund, which I like sinking funds. The other way to spread it is on the other end, to finance it, to spread the payments. That lowers this year's cost. Shift some of it into the out years with interest.
Mhm.
But we all know that's what loans are for. So perhaps a combination of the two, finance what we can in order to take money and put it into a sinking fund. And at the end of that, we have a pool from which we can draw, and we've spread some of that expense.
But then you're
in
just
these
kind
years.
of taking market risk though.
You
Like,
are,
I mean,
you are.
which I'm not a big fan of either.
But in the case of, I know,
I'll tell you, Sam Zecker used to stand up at town, and Dick Hayes would stand up at town meeting every year and say, why do we have a school bus sinking fund? The town can borrow money at a ridiculously low rate. We shouldn't be putting money away in advance. We should be borrowing money and paying it off at this ridiculously low rate, because I have to borrow money to pay my property taxes, and I'm paying a much higher rate. And I don't know if they were borrowing money to pay their property taxes or
Makes
not, but it was,
complete argument.
had too much
I
land.
always remembered that argument. It's an argument.
Right up until they
I argue,
sold that
I
property.
argue with myself about those sorts of things all the time.
So to use that theory, I mean, if, I know there's 200 coming in from the CERC fund to offset the 270,000 on the truck.
Well,
right?
no, we haven't
we-
decided on that
Yeah, it
yet.
could be circle, it could be a bank
Oh,
loan.
okay.
We're either loaning it to ourselves or, but then you're drawing down the CERC fund.
Right,
which-
no, I'm trying to think of what could spur that move in that direction to both benefit us more in this budget as well as moving forward. Like if we could split the difference to start putting money into that sinking fund. So instead of a 200,
But that's when you take advantage of an opportunity that's like something that presents itself like a sale of a property, where you take a
Lump sum.
percentage of the proceeds and say, this is gonna be our capital equipment reserve fund.
I mean, what the fire department has done
Right.
is they've done a 2026 and a 2027 budget, which shows fluctuations.
Mhm.
Like they're asking for a bigger amount this year, but it drops back down in fiscal year 2027. Same thing here. Huge amount this year, but it drops way down in fiscal year 2027.
And I think they have the
That's-
equipment schedule there
that's-
too, don't
that's
they?
They do.
flat.
I have
And
the
this
truck
is
schedule.
flat.
and that in one in particular, Ivan, the 2026, that was including the full purchase price of that tank. So I think based on the lease, that cuts it in a third or a quarter, right?
Right, quarter.
So that eliminates 30 some odd thousand from that.
But I mean, in total, they were asking for 177,000 this year, and that dropped to 84,000, way less than half.
I don't know, I find it.
Following year.
Project 18 months out, never
Well,
mind.
that's the thing. We went through an exercise, or actually a few years of trying to do a 2-year budget. And we were plugging numbers in the out years, and they weren't even close. I mean, it was a waste of time, really. We know that certain things are gonna go up, but in health insurance,
Yeah,
those kind of things. Unless there's some kind of radical change.
I guess, I'm not trying to make anyone's job more difficult, but I'd love to see us kind of managing around this process instead of feeling like we have to go through and start cutting things that I think are 100% necessary. It's hard for me to, look at the public safety people and say, not this year, and because we're trying to keep our taxes at a certain
We
rate.
went, for years when I was on the board, we had a town manager that was very friendly with the department heads. And there wasn't, the budget, the requests were not cut before the document came to us.
So it was all your.
And we could feel good about ourselves because we were slashing and cutting here and there. We've had better managers over the last several, and they're bringing us it's pretty hard to find big numbers in here that you can slash. And we always, at the end of the day, we'd always eliminate the paving budget. There, we did it. And boy, I'll tell you what, we had a bunch of, we had some pretty rough looking roads for a while. It took us a long time. Ask Jeff. It took us a long time to get back on track with that.
Still thinks we're behind a bit.
Yeah, well, he's doing a great job. We're doing all right. But, I don't know, any great ideas? None.
The option tax hasn't increased, you know, with the cost of living year over year. And
We raise the option tax?
well, to go through that process would probably take
It's above a-
another 10 years. But I do know one thing, the state would probably say, we've been doing so well with this, why not increase it?
Well, the option taxes increase organically because the price of the
Prices,
products
yeah.
that are being sold increase. We'll measure it with inflation. So it's kind of got a built-in inflationary accelerator.
Kind of.
This talk in the legislature for this session about that administrative handling fee, getting rid
There
of.
was a time when there were only 3 of us covering the administration where they might have been able to justify what they were taking, but now there's so many
Yeah.
towns contributing. There is no way that this is costing them anywhere, even a fraction of the amount of money they're collecting to administer the 1% locals.
But they're the golden rule makers, unfortunately.
We have not served well in Montpelier over the years, I will say that.
How much would it cost, or what's the process if we wanted, would a bond be too aggressive for doing a full renovation to the police department's space? Would that be a way to fund a project like that, or?
So you're floating the idea of issuing a bond, asking for approval when
From the,
fighting this percentage right now.
That would just make it even higher.
no, I know, it would make it higher.
Well,
And, you know, I mean, it's right in keeping with the issue that I think we're talking about.
well, we've talked about creating a vehicle capital fund, right? So maybe that coincides with that idea. Maybe we float a bond to cover, or ask the voters to float a bond to cover those 2 type of things. So we establish a capital fund for equipment, let's say highway equipment, because the police already have that fund established.
And the fire department has one, but we haven't funded it. We have to, I think, formalize what we think a 10-year blended number looks like for them.
There is a schedule, I think, for them. And he did say last time that the truck that we were talking about,
The
the
latter.
ladder, that might be able to be reconditioned.
Refurbished, yeah, it was a much
versus-
lower number, I think.
It's still a huge number, yeah.
1.4 million.
But anyway, going back to what you were saying,
I was just thinking, taking this opportunity to ask the voters to approve something like this where we kill at least 2 birds with this one stone. And then we shouldn't be back in the same situation next year.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with what Heidi said earlier, is I think we need to focus on the core expenses, and I've come completely around with Ivan. I feel it's important for the board itself, probably as a whole, on principle, to say no to voter appropriations, and I'll be voting no to that. But I look for other ways, like line item budgeting for the library, for example, at a cap rate of X, like we talked about with the MBA. And I see that as a reinvestment of dividends that are paying off in a huge way. I also just want to make it clear, like I always do every year, this town has intangible assets and we can't put a number on them, but the reason people come here is because we have unbelievable facilities. And I think it's important that we recognize that and sustain them. But going back to the core issues that we have to take care of, I would like us to consider this budget free of voter appropriations. And completely, I just would, I think that's the way we should go with it. And concentrate on our core responsibilities, the municipality. There, I got that in the record. And I think the idea of a bond, doing 2 or 3 things at once might be a way to handle it.
And efforts, just overall stabilization.
Yeah.
I think any sense of normalcy, and granted, we have no idea what will come next year, but
if I'm gonna go through this again,
Mhm.
and I'm gonna, with an eye toward, do I think any larger expenditure in here is going to increase, be a recurring expense, it's gonna increase or it's gonna decrease? Having quite a bit of familiarity with the numbers, I don't think on the surface that any of them are gonna decrease next year. I mean,
Minimally.
Yeah.
Yes.
not likely.
Well, I mean, maybe this is the year that we establish the baseline. I mean, maybe this is the year we say like, okay, this is what we're spending on these large, equipment purchases and we should just be budgeting this with a 5% increase every year.
Well, and then you get the capital infusion
It's,
from the sale of something that, as we've been discussing, which sort of would.
Help, it would
probably-
definitely help for when there's something that's in excess of that, but, I think Ivan's right, that, there's definitely fluctuations, year over year. But I think net, if you try to find an average that
But-
makes sense, then.
the difficulty with the fire department, if I look at these numbers, is that we were completely unaware
Right.
of these needs
That was not. on
as they're
the budget.
expressed. And I know they've been, I suspect that they've been projecting out an extra year on each one, and I wonder if it always comes in really low, but then when it transitions to this
Mhm.
column, all of a sudden it's much bigger again. I wouldn't know unless I went back.
Well,
and-
but, and it's funny because they're so good with their big equipment schedule.
Yeah,
That,
yeah,
that has been, one of the things that I've really admired about their ability to kind of look at all that stuff, but, yeah, this is, and again, I think some of it's related to the new people,
Mhm.
there's, especially like those, turnout outfits or whatever they're called.
Right.
And then I think the compressor thing was a surprise, but shouldn't have been because it was 55 years old or something like that. But
Did they put in the stipend increase for calls
yes,
per person
yeah.
and I mean, I'm 100% behind that.
the phased version.
Mhm.
Yeah.
The phase increase.
Yeah.
I'll tell you,
I mean, it's,
There's not a lot
these
to say
guys
no
take
to.
this really
Yes,
seriously. They
I
do a
agree.
great job.
Yeah.
When you need them, they're there. And
Well,
they
every
are, they
house
are
that
still
save, every
basically, I
life
mean, I
they
don't care
save.
what,
I mean,
what the number is that we pay them, they're still basically volunteers. And we need to give them the best equipment we can to do their job.
Mike, can I ask you a question, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Mike, you pointed out that this translates, the current municipal budget increase, I think we're at 10%, translates, was that right?
Well, that was the
take the-
property tax contribution.
If we take the property tax relief fund out,
Yeah,
Mhm.
and I quickly did, I think puts us at 9.3%
and Mike did a calculation that
prior to appropriation.
Yeah.
we do this every year. So that translates to
What it is.
currently a $275,000 home, which we arbitrarily picked one year.
Which
Is an increase of about $70. No, I'm sorry. that's the $275,000 home, with this budget is a tax of 700 and, went away off my screen. Mike, it's 11, that's a tax of $730,
So
731.
this would be an increase of $73.
No, just for the municipal side.
A 10% for
Yeah.
municipal side. And then if the voted appropriations get all voted on, then that's an incremental 1 or 2%, right? 1.6.
Well, just leaving it at our increase, I just want people to know what we're talking about, which, as you just said,
More than that.
for every 275,000, Heidi, you're looking at a $70 increase.
Right.
Okay, so it's good for people to understand too, how that affects their lives and.
I don't actually think it's going to be because we're not taking into account the 1% increase in the grand list.
So it'll be less than 10% ultimately.
Well, it depends on if you're talking about actual numbers in the budget, dollars, or if you're talking about the, we need to look at the property tax contribution, and that is total expenses minus non-tax revenue. And that gives us our total dollars that are contributed by property taxes. Then the grand list comes into play at that point and affects what the percentage increase is on your tax rate. But
It's a positive thing. That's less.
it will, yeah, it will, it won't subtract from our expenses.
But it'll subtract from.
It won't add into our non-property tax revenues, but it will spread
A little thinner.
a little. People will still be paying those dollars.
Right.
It's just the tax rate will be lower because their assessment or the.
Well, the point.
But the point is growth in the grand list now, after we've done the reappraisal, is going to be actual
New houses,
value that's
new
being added into the grand list. So it
businesses, yeah.
does drop other people's contributions.
The other issue being, I want to point out, as we do every year, that accounts for 17% of your overall tax in your tax bill. And so I think people in their heads, they forget, not in their heads. I think people often confuse the number that's at the bottom line on their tax bill with something that we're imposing upon them. And we need to say that as often as possible. We're not imposing that on you. We're only a fraction, not even 20% of that number. And I think when you consider that and consider the core services we provide, I think you're getting an amazing lifestyle here, as we all know and appreciate anyway, for that amount of money. And so I'm just pointing it out.
Yeah, I don't want our budget to be held hostage by voted appropriations. The voters have the ability to affect that themselves.
Right.
And I don't want to be held hostage by education funding. That's out of our control. The state's going up 14%. We can be aware of the impact that's going to have on our constituency, but we shouldn't hold our budget hostage because of it.
Yeah.
By the way, the number right now is 6.
Yeah, I know. I'm talking about
Okay.
last year.
Just in
The
case.
year that
I don't want to get any wrong.
The fiscal year that we're in.
And that's before any negotiations, because last year it was close to 20 and it came to 13, 14.
Yeah.
So
13 point something.
there could be some movement there still. I just have one other question. This is, I know, just random, but I know with pre-purchasing of fuel oils, for instance, you get discounted rate. Just looking at the expenditures from our highway department, the fire department and all those, do we pre-buy for fuel? Or is it at market?
No. We get a municipal rate for that. We do pre-buy, like winter and sand and salt. We have a rate in advance. We sign a contract and
And
a
sometimes
certain amount.
it's in favor.
Well, yeah, I get that.
And if it doesn't, we hold on to it for next year anyway, so we don't.
I do want to point out
Gordon,
that we have a grant to put heat pumps in buildings, so the oil use should be greatly reduced.
Great.
Correct.
yeah,
All right, we have a lot to get to.
Yeah, we do.
We got
Um,
it in the next set.
I think it's really interesting that our largest departments have the least amount of increase. You know, we talk about the highway department, you know,
they did a good job.
every year that comes in at a pretty reasonable increase. The same is true with the police department. That's largely labor costs, and yet they still come in pretty low on the 4.65% increase. Highway was less than that, 2-point-something%, I think. So so I don't know if the expenses on the nuts and bolts part of that are a big issue for us. I think maybe it's, and it's hard to the single biggest increase is the recreation department, but there's a lot going on there.
Well, we also chosen to stop certain revenue streams there,
Yeah,
which
right.
that's,
There may be a way
we should,
I think the idea that the NBA floated just now is that person they're hiring might also affect the revenue stream over at Parks and Rec. And there may be a way to bring back some programming there that generates revenue that we don't have to assign staff to.
But
which
we're
is-
adding in $25,000 to our budget on the
Right.
expense side in order to accommodate that. So there's
Right.
there's
Well, we've-
already another addition on the expense side.
Well, when the field, Applejack Field had been renovated, there was a lot of money that was donated too, in addition, but there was an expense side initially, and then we saw it beginning to trail off in our.
Is there
revenue.
an outstanding balance still on Applejack Field? And what's due back to the rec, or to the?
I think we washed,
we
I think we
reconciled
did.
that.
yeah, we reconciled.
Yeah, but I never really got
No, right,
the contribution. I mean, after
properly. Yeah.
all those years, you're not gonna get a lot more contribution.
Speaking of Applejack Field, is there, I have heard, and this is for clarification too, I'd heard that at some point there was an agreement with Burton as they were renovating the fields, that they were going to cost share or do some sort of sharing of the maintenance and the upkeep of those fields.
We have,
As kind of an agreement.
well, we have an agreement now, not for the Applejack fields, for the other two fields that were built. So there was an agreement with that, but it had nothing to do with maintenance. It was just about cost share initially and then priority of use.
Well, listen, I think that the whole rec department relationship is something that, we all value very much as a town, but we definitely subsidize significantly all the programming. And so to the extent that we can figure out ways to have that be a more efficient revenue source rather than a cost center, we should look at that. And I know that will require human capital, but it's an asset that we need to make sure is self-funding.
That was,
it doesn't-
that was the reason why Applejack Field became the center of events, because the economic study indicated that it was a possible revenue generating center for the town. And so John O'Keefe went ahead with our blessing and created all of those programs that unfortunately took staff time. It was
Not only that, your major source of revenue went away. They dissolved.
and
Fusion Soccer dissolved.
Yeah, but let's get the UVM soccer team to come to an exhibition game.
Trying to get them now, yeah.
Sell out the stadium.
After last night, I'll give them a call.
I think I think the thing was that with John's departure, there went a huge amount of effort, and that was a vacuum that we couldn't fill.
Applejack on the 24 budget had a budgeted amount of between rental and receipts was $22,000.
Yeah.
But then we shut down the concession stand, we stopped selling the banners, we stopped charging at the gate. There's a lot of things that we can look at
Yeah.
that we don't need to like get.
Right, and that was one of the things too. If you rent out not only the field, but you allow for vendors to come in and you get X% of their take and you charge for the field there may be a way at least to cut that deficit and maybe grow it. I mean, not the deficit, but the income
This,
over time.
this sounds like a great opportunity to bring back the rec committee.
The only problem with that is it's staffing issues. I mean, closing it down at night and having somebody, it's expensive, but I think it was heading in the right direction. It just was so labor intensive. And our staff was being asked to be there on weekends and at night and all this, and it was a little crazy. And I don't think a lot of staff members felt that was what they signed up for.
Well, let's look at someone really close and comparable. Look at Riley Rink. I mean, how much do they generate for revenue for the use of the rink? I don't know their numbers, but I know they have quite,
And Riley,
common type of situation.
Riley Rink, I mean, I have to give Merrick a lot of credit for they were gonna submit a request for voted appropriation. And we had a talk and they decided not to, and it was a pretty significant amount. And they said, we'll make it up some other way. But that's always hanging out there. That's a tough.
It's true, but I mean, 22,000 is not a large revenue amount.
No.
It really isn't.
But
in the
I also
cost
think
and
that
size of this
that was low,
start.
that's like a low ball. If you actually could have run that like a business instead of,
Let's hire someone then.
I mean,
Right.
I
Well, that's
agree.
what it costs. I mean, it costs money to make money. And that's one of those areas where I think the only way to do it is to hire somebody.
Or if this board wants to go that.
I would like to
I mean,
see, I mean, again, I'm not completely dismissing the idea of the events coordinator because I think it could go a long ways, but you gotta flesh it out. I mean, how much more, if we're having all these events and the town is responsible for them, how much more is it gonna cost us to staff these events and all that? And then what's the offsetting revenue that's associated with it? I don't know off the top of my head. I don't have a clue.
I mean, if that's the direction the board kind of wants to go to, we could angle towards like a part-time events director at the
park.
Well, that,
Not
you
to
would
the
think
town in
that would
general.
help if you coordinate.
Right, it would help the
ADA,
town.
We could figure out, it wouldn't have to be just, I mean, that place is, it's
If-
4 months of the year.
I thought Brian was.
That was my suggestion initially to them anyway.
Not only as a part-time
Right.
assistant, but also somebody that was gonna be there to help
But
with
maybe
that kind of thing with the events and even be there full, all year, not part-time, but organizing these things year round, getting ready for the on-season stuff. But anyway,
Gordon has his.
Gordon.
We always had those people until recently.
Yeah.
We had Jacqueline, we had Brooks.
Yeah.
Before that, there was another one, who's Nicole.
yeah,
And they were there and paid as a full-time employee of the town to do exactly what you're talking about. When Brooks left, he was never replaced.
Mhm. Yeah.
So you're not, well.
Yeah, and Brian has asked for
He needs help.
a part-time, full-time position. And that's anticipated in this.
Right, but that's to help with the grounds and get the
Right.
pool ready and counselors.
That's a lot.
It's
It is a
not a revenue generating position.
Yep.
So-
Yeah, I mean, we've had this discussion before. Could the town benefit from having somebody who's in their job description, they're going out for grants? Grants may not be as readily available in the future as they have been in the past,
That
but
ship's filled.
that position would have
2 more
served us
weeks.
well, certainly through the whole COVID and
Mhm.
beyond.
Yeah.
When there was a lot of
God
grants
for-
available.
Well,
Gordon.
Gordon has done a great job.
Gordon's done a
I
great
mean,
job.
He's been kind of the de facto grant chaser and done a great job.
The fire department, by the way, is applying for some grants grants for some of this equipment, I think that you're talking.
Good, it'll go to the capital.
But that's a little bit of a long shot.
Yeah.
I know we're kind of talking, I was semi-serious about the rec committee. I think that this may be an opportunity for a group of people to actually really start zeroing back in on the use and the purpose and the mission of the rec department.
The trouble with that structure as it existed before was that they were completely detached from the rest of municipal activity
Right?
and had all kinds of grand ideas as how to spend money over there, but there was never any real discussion about, you know, how's this going to get paid for and all that. We were constantly being approached with requests, but
Yeah. I was thinking, just like the housing task force, if it could be the same type of mentality of like, here's your decision to like start utilizing those.
we're gonna have to,
We have to really.
Yeah.
move it
we've
along.
got some ground to cover here, so I'm gonna have to move it along. I don't know. Let's see, what can we do? What can we do between now and our next meeting relative to budget? Is there something that some kind of exercise we can go through or?
Pray.
Well, I mean,
Right.
if
No
the
shift,
bond,
right?
if the bond was the option, what does that mean?
Kicking the can
What
down.
does
the
a
road.
bond mean? That would be interesting. I'd love to hear.
Well, our debt service actually went down a little bit. We paid something off.
There's one other thing,
got one,
it's the
yeah.
last payment.
Right.
Yeah, but that, you know, can you allow it to go down and just not fund it again?
I shouldn't borrow our money just for the sake of borrowing money.
No, we don't want to do that. I think it should be purpose generated.
I always ask, well,
Obviously.
whenever we start conversations about a bond, I always ask the question, how do we compare to other towns, our indebtedness compared to our value or, you know, whatever the ratio is that they use to see what's the right number of debt for a town. And I've always been assured that we're well below the average of the state, but there is no real target number. What our
Well,
the assets or,
the 9.3 or whatever percentage we're at now by pulling the property tax relief fund out,
Mhm.
is obviously not acceptable and you want to get a little lower than that. So let me come up with some ideas and I'll try to narrow it down and give you a couple of good options
anything you can do
based on your discussions tonight.
greatly appreciated. You know, what we're talking about at the rec, I think there's some things that can happen there that might affect that
Mhm.
on the revenue side. In the big picture, it's not that significant of a number, though. It's not gonna bring it down.
Yeah, but it's a $200,000 cost.
But I mean, what I say every year is, if you take care of the pennies, the dollars will take care of
Yeah.
themselves, and that's what you do in every department. But
I mean, even if it's like figuring out different ways to fund some of that summer programming that ends up being very expensive.
Well, the pickleball people talked about generating a lot of revenue too.
um,
You know, that's a potential source.
okay, we're gonna keep.
Yeah.
What? Do we have a critical path as to when things need to get done? I
We
know
do.
we're working on
Very
that.
much do.
Yeah.
And so we need another meeting before the end of the year.
We do?
We do for this, just for this. And it would probably be best to, you know, close it to public discussion until after the select board's had
Yeah,
a chance to chew on it.
yeah. So we're gonna have to get this
If we want to,
sitting down.
want to set a date now,
For
sometime before the end of the year,
an open another meeting?
a select board budget discussion meeting.
Next Tuesday is Christmas Eve.
Yeah, that,
Is that good for you?
No, we wouldn't have any public comment probably. And then the following Tuesday is New Year's Eve.
can we do the
Monday, the
30th?
30th.
Everyone's gonna be sick of their family by then.
Sounds good to me.
What do you?
Monday.
Monday, the 30th
Can
of
we start, if it's a special meeting?
Start at
early?
Start at 5.
5,
I'll be late.
5:30.
5:30.
5:30? All right.
Mike, is that good for you?
Be there though.
I'll be there.
Okay.
5:30, 30th.
That's,
Okay.
What day and time was that? I'm sorry.
5:30 and the 30th.
You'll either be here or on the road.
5:30 on December 30th. Yeah, I mean, I can actually attend that one, I guess. Because if I zoomed it, I'd have to leave early.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Well, we'll figure
I
that
was
out.
doing a little bit of calculating in the background while you guys were talking. And based on the budget the way it is right now, without anticipating the grand list going up and without increasing the special appropriations, we're potentially looking at a tax rate of, what's it? 0.3144, as opposed to 0.2909 last year.
Three, one, four, four.
So that's the difference of,
from 0.29, what, 0.2914, you said?
0.2909 is the current year.
So what's that on a percentage basis?
that's about, I was
Six-ish,
gonna say,
I think. Just off the top of my head, I didn't calculate it.
well, it's,
Yeah.
yeah, it's about 15 out of, it's about, yeah, it's 0.5%.
Okay.
Or excuse me, 5%. Decimal point. But, interesting. Puts us over that 30 cents. We haven't been on. Not, I'm not gonna prolong this any
All right, we
longer.
gotta get, we gotta-
Okay.
We were over 30 cents.
We were before the reappraisal. We were. So, town manager updates, do we have any for tonight?
Just a couple quick ones. I think, just to let you know, Bonnie's last day was today. And, Katie Dixon is going to replace her. She's starting on the 30th.
I met Katie.
Did you?
Yeah.
Good.
I came in to sign checks.
I think she'll be good. She'll be bringing a lot of energy and, some good HR experience too. And she's anxious to get working with
She seemed really excited.
community, our community events. Let's do some more of that. And we've got ongoing police union negotiations continuing. We're meeting again tomorrow.
Mhm.
Also, but that's moving forward. That's all I have right now.
My understanding is that that's going pretty well.
Is there any update on the tower, the cell tower?
Yeah, thank you.
Haven't heard anything on that.
Okay.
but we provided incremental information.
Right.
Yeah.
We're all set for the moment as far as response.
So, is there any other business at the table? If not, we have some executive session items.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman,
Well, it's not really cannabis, but it's
what,
refreshing.
make a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing various topics, the pre-disclosure of which could put the town at a distinct disadvantage.
I'd like to narrow it down, various topics. It's real estate.
Negotiating or securing real estate purchase or lease options.
And that's the only reason we're going in.
That's correct.
Okay.
Well, you can insert that where I said various.
I've got it written down already.
It's already there. And do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Okay, we're in.
Oh,
Now,
Oh,
for those of you that are,
Wait, hold on.
you're watching.
Gordon, we should invite Gordon into our.
Yeah, just make a
executive.
note that Gordon will be joining us in the
Yeah.
executive session. And,
Do we
our next
anticipate?
meeting is, as you heard, is December 30th at 5:30 PM. I don't anticipate any action coming out of this. Do you, Scott?
Do not.
So I think the only action will be to close the meeting when we come out of executive session. If you want to wait for that, you're welcome to. Otherwise, I thank you for attending. And we'll see you on the 30th.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.